All right, I can see folks are coming in, and we'll wait till everybody gets into the room. But if you're in the room now, welcome. This is Marc Roberts, and we'll get started in just a minute here. I keep watching to make sure all of our participants are in, and I think we're good now to go. So let me begin by saying again, I'm Marc Roberts, and I work at the Max Dupree Center for Leadership at Fuller Seminary. And I am delighted to welcome you to this webinar that's called Purposeful Retirement, Live Well as You Make a Difference That Matters. The webinar is sponsored by the Max Dupree Center for Leadership at Fuller. We're committed to helping leaders thrive as they make a difference that matters in the world. And the Dupree Center has been focused for over 20 years, really on helping leaders in the marketplace, also in the church. But in recent years, we've realized that millions of leaders are entering a new season of life. Sometimes we call that retirement, though we speak of the third of life. And we've discovered that many in this time aren't quite sure how to think about this season of life, or how to prepare for it, or how to live well into it. And so within the last year, we have started a new work about flourishing in the third of life. And our goal and our mission is to help you, if you're in that season of life or approaching it, flourish, both in the sense of your own well-being and living well, but also in the sense of making a difference and making a kingdom difference in the world. If you're interested, you can learn a lot more at our website, and that there'll be a link to our website in the chat. It's also just Dupree, DEPREE.org. So I'm really pleased to introduce to you our guest for today's webinar, Marc Belton. Marc has had a distinguished career at General Mills. He ended up as the Executive Vice President of Global Strategy Growth, Marketing Innovation, and New Business Development. He has been recognized as one of corporate America's most influential leaders, and importantly, a powerful Black executive. And he has done many interesting things in that workplace. But about 6 years ago, Marc retired from General Mills, and he founded Wise Fellows Consulting, serving companies and nonprofit organizations in matters of strategy and marketing. And he's also an active angel investor. He's an advisor to Ethlon Capital. And in addition to his consulting and advising work, Marc serves in a wide range of community organizations, including the Salvation Army, the Guthrie Theater, Northwestern College. These are in the Minneapolis and St. Paul area. Urban Ventures, the Minnehaha Academy, and he's deeply invested in not only in his own family, but as a mentor to many others. And I first got to know Marc some years ago when he spoke at a conference that I was helping to lead. And I was struck by his wisdom and his insight, his faith. And so I was excited to be able to reach out to him and see if we could talk a little bit about what life has been like for him in the third. He has got a lot of wisdom to share with us. So Marc, thank you so much for joining us today, for your willingness to share your story. And I expect there's going to be some good learning for all of us here. So let me begin by asking, how did you know, some 6 years ago or so, how did you know that it was time for you to retire from General Mills?
Yeah, well, thanks, Marc. And you know, it's a privilege to be able to, do this webinar and frankly, to partner with you and the Dupree Center. Some of the great books I read when I first became a Christian were, Leadership as an Art and Leadership Jazz and things like that. And so, since our early connection a number of years ago, it's just been a real pleasure, to be able to serve in this kind of way. What I would say is we always had a couple things that we did and we learned at our old company. And the first one was we were to ask ourselves 3 questions. 1, do you have enough? Number 2, have you had enough? I've had enough of this. And the third one's probably the most important, which is there something you'd like to do? And I think you put that in context of the fact that I was blessed to have a family in my latter days, and I wanted to retire by the time my son was 10 or 11 or 12 because I wanted to walk alongside him. You know, it's kind of crazy out here in this world. And I just thought, gosh, if I can do that, that would be great. The jobs I had at General Mills, I did a fair amount of traveling. As you said, I did global strategy jobs and M&A jobs.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was on the road a lot. And I just thought, you know, it's a privilege to be able to first answer those first two questions, say, yeah, we're blessed to have enough. And I think I may have had enough. This has been a good run. And there are lots of things that I'd be interested in doing. So that was kind of the initial context for thinking about it. I guess the other part of it was just, you know, from a workplace standpoint, you know, I had really had a chance to do a lot. And I just felt from the inside out that, you know, this season is moving on, you know, and it's, you've done great stuff, you're doing great stuff, but there may be other things out there to do. And I was willing to give that a try.
Yeah. You know, I'm impressed by all three of your questions, but I think often that last question is one that folks maybe don't ask as often when they're going into retirement. As is there something I want to do with my life, something I want to invest in, something more. In fact, the statistics show and the surveys that have been done show that most people, they might think some about their financial well-being in retirement, but they give very little thought to what they're actually going to do or live for. Now, you were much more purposeful. You want to talk about that and how you, before you retired, how you were thinking about what was coming next?
Yeah, you know, I'd say 5 years or more before, I started to say, hey, I better set up the chessboard if I want to do something different. And I grew up in a household and a family that was big on serving. My parents weren't professional people, but they knew that they had hands, arms, legs, and minds to contribute to their communities. And so that was always a part of my thinking and my background. And I started, you know, kind of saying, hey, if I'm going to have another phase, I better work on creating, you know, the opportunities that I would like in these areas of service. And, you know, so in many ways, you know, I had started to build on some of those things that I thought I might have some passion in. And, you know, so I thought that was probably the most important thing, you know, to do, is not to think, okay, I'm done, these guys are driving me nuts, it's time to leave, and then go, well, where do I go? Versus saying, hey, let's think about this up front, and let's start planting some seeds that maybe we would be lucky enough to be able to, you know, to reap those later. You know, if we get involved, if we're able to make a difference, they may have some value in the future. And so that's what I started to do.
Man, it makes so much sense. One of the things we do in our third work at the Pree Center is we do cohorts and really help people to think in some new ways about their lives and their future and what God has for them. But one of the things we get people to think about it, what are they really longing for? And a lot of times, you know, in the busyness of life, and you've got to work and you've got family and you've got just so much going on, a lot of times we don't really stop to think, what do I really long for in this season of my life? And it sounds like that's one of the things you really started thinking about, what you really wanted to do with your life in the next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And it manifested itself in some really interesting ways. You know, literally the week after I retired, the first thing I did was I signed myself up at the McPhail School of Music to take piano. And, you know,
Had you
never played it. Had played lots of instruments before. You know, in fact, if you ever hear my ministry story, you know, I was a kid who was playing in nightclubs when I was 15 years old, the bass guitar. But, you know, you work so hard, and, you know, as work becomes so much a larger part of your life, and then your family and everything else, you move away from, you know, some of those other gifts. And I just thought, wow, here's a chance to start new. Let me go and get involved in this. You know, I thought about doing angel investing because I had actually created some innovation hubs and innovation investment wings for General Mills. I said, this is going to be something that would be fun. I loved theater and had gotten involved at the Guthrie. But, you know, as things started moving on, we were looking for a new executive director, and they asked me and a group of people to actually start the search for that. I said, man, this is great. Let's make the commitment and get involved in that at a deeper level. A few years later, next thing you know, I'm chair of the theater with the person that we helped identify in our search. I had been involved in the Salvation Army many years before, doing the capital campaign for this Twin Cities marketplace. And later on, I got a call from someone saying, hey, would you like to serve, on this national board? And I was like, absolutely, that'd be an honor. Got involved. Next thing you know, I'm running the marketing committee for them,
Yep.
using all these marketing skills that I had. And, now I'm vice chairman of the National Board of Salvation Army. So I think a lot of it is early planting of seeds, thinking about things you'd like to do. The irony of it all is I thought I'd play a lot more golf. Frankly, I played more golf when I was working than I play today.
That's funny. Yeah. Hey, that's so great. I want to just underscore a couple of things that you said. One is you talked about taking piano, and there's actually a lot of research out there that shows that people in our season of life, the third of life, actually one of the great things you can do for your brain is to take an instrument, a new instrument. You can pick up one you've done before, but it changes the way the brain functions, and it helps the brain be more a plastic, more not get stuck. And so there's actually, though you didn't do it for this reason, if you had read up about, wow, what's all the research on aging, you would say, oh, I'm going to take piano because I want my brain to be strong and fresh. And I just think that's you got into it another way. The other thing you mentioned, you said about really deciding to be committed to something, and this is actually something that trips up some folks in retirement. They've been committed their whole life. They've had the job or the series of jobs, and then they first retire, and there's something about it's like, man, I get to do whatever I want, and this feels really great. There's sometimes a reticence in people to make that commitment. It sounds like you were ready to do that. Am I reading you right?
That's an interesting one. I would say there's a practical reality that I had, which was I've got an 11-year-old right now. So, so she will not graduate school until 2028. So the idea that I was going to be hopping around and, catching my good friend Marc out in California for this and running to the Caribbean for a week and doing this and that wasn't practical. I've got a daughter in school. I've got a son who's 14. They're in school. We're going to be here. So, so the idea of making a commitment, frankly, I wanted to have some commitments because I wasn't going to be able to, live the life that you see in the advertising. The advertisements about making your financial future, and you got two people as a couple on the beach, walking along, after having taken.
It's always the beach, the golf course, or the cruise ship. That's right. Where if you check that out, and not that there's anything wrong with a little of that, but there, that's not enough, not only to fill one's life, but again, one of the things I've done in our third work, I read a lot of the research. Like, what are we learning about this? What's medical science telling us? What's brain science telling us? And again, one of the things they find is that people who sort of move into retirement and just play, just do whatever they want, and aren't engaged in something that has meaning, they actually don't do as well. There's a greater incidence of depression and loneliness. That those who discover something or create something meaningful and are committed to it, saying, I will do this. I'll be in, whether it's on this board that I'll be committed to, or I'm going to work in this school and tutor kids, and that those who make that commitment are the ones that actually thrive. And Marc, one of the things you've been doing is consulting, and that's a little different from obviously what you did at General Mills. What's that been like for you to sort of repurpose your executive leadership now in a consulting role?
Yeah, I think the difference is, today I get to choose, clients. Secondly, when we say consulting, I'm as much an advisor as a consultant. I'm not I'm not trying to build a business by pitching, United Healthcare here in the Twin Cities. I'm going to leave that to McKinsey and BCG and those guys. What I like doing is advising folks and leveraging the skills that I developed, over those 30 odd years in strategy and marketing, brand development and things like that to help unlock a business's potential, it's very different if you're saying, hey, I'm going to do the BCG thing. I'm going to take all your data, crunch it, and come back and give you an analysis. What I'm trying to do is give people my experiences, and so I'll get a variety of different clients. Some clients are private equity firms and they want to understand CPG. I'll do work for people like the Atlanta Jazz Festival, because that's something I'm interested in. You don't have to pay me a lot to do that one. I'm going to do that one pretty much for free. I'll work with small businesses, where, someone is like, I just need someone to help me sort this out. How do you think about this? And you can give advice. And interestingly enough, these people will take it, because you've done some things they haven't done. So I've set it up very differently, than maybe, if I was really, if I hadn't already answered those first couple of questions, do you have enough? Have you had enough?
Yeah.
You might do it differently, but, this has suited me great, and I've really enjoyed it. But, as the years have gone on, I'm probably doing less of that, frankly, and more of the other stuff. And that's fine too.
Yeah. I expect there are probably some folks on this call who are thinking, well, I don't have that kind of executive experience, and I really couldn't do that sort of thing. I mean, what you are doing and are doing is stewarding, using well your gifts and experiences that are distinctive to you. But I mean, every human being has gifts and experiences that can be well used in new ways and in new seasons. And it strikes me that if somebody, I think, for example, a friend of mine who, he loves tinkering with cars, and he's really that kind of person, which I am not that kind of person. And he's loving doing this in retirement. But he's beginning to discover the possibility of bringing in, say, some younger kids from the local school and teaching them how to tinker with cars. And so it's whatever God has given us, whatever experiences we have, can be leveraged. I think of a woman I met down in Arizona who was a business person, did really well. She retired, and her heart was really about having to do with immigration issues. And so she actually used her skills and started a nonprofit and is serving in that, challenging area. So there's this opportunity to use well what God has given us. And so it sounds like you're enjoying your consultant work, but not doing quite as much of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If a project comes through and someone needs me, to work on, the consumer food space and help a business perhaps be sold, or someone to raise capital, I'll do that. I love the angel investing area, so I get a chance, with a lot of clients that we invest in, to perhaps also advise them.
Marc,
but it can be richer. It can be richer. There's lots to do out here.
If there may be some who aren't quite familiar with the term angel investor, do you want to just explain what that is and what you get to do in that role?
Yeah, angel investors are people who, for a variety of reasons, can identify opportunities from young entrepreneurs and business leaders. And they get in on what you would call it the front end, the early investments in companies that are small. And very often, at that stage, there are opportunities for equity, but there's also opportunities to provide advice and guidance.
Yeah.
And so, I've gotten involved with some angel investing with African American entrepreneurs, which has been fantastic. To use some of my skills to help other people, especially people of color who are underrepresented, on the capital formation and resource gathering part of this world. And so that's been, those are there's just a variety of things that you can do out there if you look at what the Lord has already given you, and then you try to take that forward.
Yeah. So some of what you've been doing is continued to be in sort of the for-profit space. You've been doing, you mentioned a lot of nonprofit work. You want to talk a little bit about that and you know, what that's been like for you, and how did you figure out where to engage? And you mentioned you love theater, so that was a kind of an easy thing. How have you figured out, okay, I'm going to invest my time, my leadership in these places?
Yeah, well, number one, you look at where you've got some areas of passion, right? Number two, you ought to look at areas where you have some capability, some ability, something where you can do something. And for me, the third one is, is it a place that you can have some impact? Where you feel like you can make a difference as material. And let me tell you, those three circles together, everyone has those three circles. Those opportunities are available to every person, because they know you should know what you're passing on. You're 50 some odd years old, maybe 60. You ought to have some ideas, right? Number two, you ought to have some sense of what your skills are. And then the third one, can I have impact? I mean, no one wants to be involved in things where they go, hey, I'm doing something I don't want to do. I'm not even sure I'm good at doing it, and I don't know why I'm doing it. No, it's supposed to be the other way around.
So it just strikes me, it's so important. And, in one of the cultural narratives for getting older in retirement, it's sort of like, well, you retire and now you're kind of in no impact land, right? You just get to do what you want and play. And for that matter, you're older, so your ability to impact is decreased, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a very positive story. I mean, I'm hearing from you, but I'm also hearing from so many others with whom we're working in our third work, that there is this great desire in people, even if they're going to retire from their primary career and be fully, 100% retired. They're not done. One guy said, I don't think I'm done. I really want to do something that makes a difference. And in the best case scenario, and in a different story, retirement, either complete retirement or partial retirement, may very well give folk freedom to be investing in some of the things that they really couldn't do when they were working full time and carrying all the responsibilities of that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's no question, that's the case. The other thing is, when you get into a lot of these jobs and you've done them for a long time and you quote unquote, move to some high stage or high phase of them, you are really locked. And I wanted more variety. I wanted to be able to do a variety of different things moving forward. I'd done the vertical where you go from top to bottom and back and up. And I was looking to do things that would be really different so that you could grow in new ways. And if you take the capabilities and the skills that you've learned and find ways to apply them in new ways, that's the ultimate gift.
Now, I want to, before I ask you another question, I want to mention to those of you who are participating today, in a few minutes, there'll be a time, if you have any questions for Marc, where we'll do it. You can put it in. There's a Q&A at the bottom of the screen. You click on that. If you put in your question, then I'll deliver that, and we'll be glad to respond to any questions you might have. So that'll be in a few minutes. We'll start in on the Q&A. But Marc, one of the things I do want to ask you about, when we talked before, you talked about your commitment to mentoring and supporting younger leaders. You brought it up here again, just in terms of supporting younger Black leaders and organizations. You want to talk about sort of what is that vision, and what is that yearning of your heart to be able to do that, and also just talk about kind of what you've been doing and how it's working.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate to get a group of young African-American leaders, are probably between the age of 30 and maybe 40. We get together every other Thursday. They're called the Lions. And, I had another group years back, and they were the Bereans, studying God's word. And what we do is we pick challenging books to read. Even books for you theologians that would be challenging, like COD, The Cost of Discipleship by Bonhoeffer. or No Excuses by Tony Evans, or books by N.T. Wright on, on basic Christianity, or John Stott's, book on Christianity. We read books. I put together questions, and we get together on Thursday mornings, and we take the first half hour just to talk about our lives, our families, our concerns. We spend the next 45 or 50 minutes actually going through the text, and I've got questions, and we ask everyone to be prepared, because there's no reason to come to stuff if you're not prepared, because your contributions can't be multiplied that way. And then the last thing we do is we have prayer. And and the great thing about it is not that these are the most wonderfully, orchestrated sessions, but the great thing is it gives me relationships where I'm in people's lives. And, it could be 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I've got someone from Medtronic calling me and saying, hey, Mark, I've got a presentation coming up. How would you think about it? Or I've got another person just like yesterday who's, unfortunately telling me he's having significant marital stress, and and asking for wisdom. I will say other times, in non-COVID, we get together for breakfast, and I will tell you, people, they feel great about those breakfasts. I really enjoy it because I love being in people's lives, and I'm convinced that half the time these young men are talking to me, and when they hear themselves, the words bounce off my bald head, bounce back to them, and they hear themselves, they solve half their problems. They don't solve them because I have the wisdom. They solve them because they hear themselves. Yeah. And, but it gives me that privilege of being in people's lives in a very different way. We center ourselves around God's word and prayer. We have Vegas rules. So whatever goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. We're not out running around table bearing other people's business. And I have seen God work in powerful ways, through these kinds of things. So that, and it's one of those things that we just was, you're praying about it, asking God, would this be something? Someone comes by, hey, I'd love to be mentored. It's like, great, all right, well, can we get some other guys too? Yeah, I can find some guys. And then 2 other, hey, this would be a great guy. Next thing you know, you've got a group and you're off to the races.
Man, it's very, I think it's going to be very encouraging, because partly the way you describe mentoring, I think could be empowering to folks who might think, well, I really don't have that much to offer, right? I don't have all the answers. And if I'm going to be a mentor, I guess I have to have all the answers. You're saying, no, it's more like letting them talk, reflecting back. I love
Yeah.
your forehead comment. I'm with you there. It helps to have the forehead. But the full-headed hair people in our webinar today, they could also do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Some days are tough though. We had one yesterday. Obviously I live here in Minneapolis, and we've been having some serious issues in this town. Another young man, Dante Wright, was killed here last week. And we spent the majority of our time yesterday, just talking. And for some of these young men, it was venting. For some of it was trying to find hope in the scriptures. Unfortunately, it was the second time in the past 12 months that we've had to have one of these, because, George Floyd was also, unfortunately murdered here in this town. And we just had a similar format, open it up, let people talk about their experiences, their feelings, how they're dealing, trying to find something in the scripture. So, God, by his graciousness, gave me Psalm 82, where we could read that together and talk about what that means, and try to provide some hope and encouragement, and say, look, our hope is in the Lord. Also, I'm encouraging you as young leaders to know that you have a role, in this, to make things better, because we're called to do that. We're called to salt and light everything. Because that's the nature of our God. And so there, some days are tougher than others, but every one of them I found to be very rewarding, and I'm thankful just to be a part of.
Well, yes, indeed. And I appreciate your bringing up the things that you folks we're struggling with as a nation, but especially in your part of the world, up in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. I know that you have also been, in addition to working with this particular group that you've been mentoring, you've been doing some things related to issues of racial justice, and another way for you to use your gifts and all. You want to talk a little bit about what you've been doing there and what your vision is for how what needs to happen, but also how you can make a difference there.
Yeah, after George Floyd murder, the Twin Cities corporate leaders, quote unquote, wrote an op-ed and a letter saying, hey, we affirm the need for change. We want to do this, we want to do that. And there was an African-American group that I'm a part of called the Boule. We decided actually to respond to their letter with tangible things we thought that could be done. And we came up with 7 different verticals of opportunity, whether it was in the area of education, frankly, public safety, pretty obvious, in the area of wages and job creation and the creation of careers, livable wages, infrastructure, healthcare. We kind of ticked down the list and said, here are some things we believe we should be doing. And as a result of that, we actually started to connect in with other business leaders in town. And we started this process of creating what we're calling right now the Alliance of Alliances. And what we're trying to actually do is to combine a corporate partner, a philanthropic partner, and community-led partnerships around each of these verticals to try to bring about change in our communities. And you can pull it up. We just announced it about a week or 2 ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. But, it's a different approach to trying to solve some of our community-based problems. I don't have any illusions that we'll solve them all or that they'll ever be fully solved, but we're here to move the ball forward, to make things better. And the areas that, frankly, we're struggling in are areas that are creating some of the strife we have in our communities.
But how can we find, is there a title to that response paper that you mentioned? How can we find it? Because I'd love to see it. I expect others would too.
Yeah, let me, I don't know if I have a formal title.
All right, I'll tell you what.
I can send you the initial.
Tell you what, why don't you send it to me, and then when we'll send that out to the participants when we do a feedback response. So
and if you do some digging here in Minneapolis, you ask about the Alliance of Alliances for Community Change, there'll be a pop-up. But the verticals in that letter, I can certainly send to you, Mark.
That's great. We are getting a couple of questions, and I want to make sure I see, and they're yeah. So this is good. So this particular person says, I'm keen to hear from Mark how he balances getting too busy with all the great opportunities available. Is this a tension for him, and how does he manage that tension? I mean, you've got a lot. You've got that patchwork of life in the third. How do you know what to do and not do? How do you know when you're doing enough and when it's too much?
Yeah, that's really tough. I don't know if there's ever a clear answer, on that. I had trouble with that at work, when I was doing work. One thing my wife and I did was we created this structure in our own heads after we got to a certain number of things where you had to be one in, one out. So if you were going to bring something new in, you had to be willing to say, well, I'm going to let this go. And that's a good governor, because, there are lots of things we'd love to pull in, but, you get to a point where you can't. And so we have a one in, one out. I know there's some things she'd like to be doing right now, but she hasn't determined what she wants to let out. So sometimes we get involved in things and we'll do them for a few years and then we sunset them because there's something else that we're just as interested in, or we feel we're being led to do, or, we have great interest in. And we just kind of operate that way.
Well, I'm struck in your answer that a key part of that was your dialogue with your wife about it, and having someone else who is, working with you on that. I think I would confess that when I don't talk to my wife about my workload, it's when I often get in a big mess.
Right. So we're aligned. There'll be times when she's got something, I'm like, I don't know. We got these 2 kids and they're great, but I want to spend time with them and they need some time. And so, having the dialogue, I think, is half of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, got another question from another person he's wondering about in your mentoring of Black men, and these are in such challenging times. Uh, you talked about listening to them and feeding back, but you talked about providing a place for people to just say what they needed to say and have that kind of freedom to lament, right?
Yeah.
Freedom to, but also to think about what could be done. I'm curious about how I don't know quite how to put this in this question. Do you encourage them in terms of their own agency? How do you talk about the fact that certainly there's a sense in which they are or have been or will be victims of racism? So there's kind of a victim piece. There's an agency piece. I don't know quite exactly how to frame that up, but I just wonder how you work with them in a way that is really appropriate given the context in which we live. And again, I think one of the things you already said was providing a place where people can just talk and share their heart, and that's got to be part of it. Is there more though?
I wish things were so tidy that you could just say, here's the bow tie, here's the plan. I think number one, you have to listen. Number two, these are Christian young men. So we have a hope. Our hope is in the Lord, who is maker of heaven and earth. We have a hope in a God that is a God of justice and righteousness, and who is a God of mercy and love. And as sure as we're sitting here, I can tell you right now, he's not happy with what's going on. So we have a hope because we know he's not happy with what's going on. He is going to move on this, and he's going to do it through us. So yes, we're going to lament. Yes, we're also going to have hope. And yes, we're going to see are there things that we can do, as you guys call them, our personal agency or our ability to be involved in making things better. That's just a part of our life call. So I never want to have a meeting where we're only lamenting and that there's no hope, or that we're only solving things but stuffing all of our problems. Right now, it is exhausting to be, I'll be honest, it's exhausting to be African American in this country right now. It is exhausting,
Mm.
And we're tired. And I'm tired of talking to my kid about these issues. I'm tired of having to meet and lament about them. I'm tired of having, frankly, most of my majority culture friends asking me, what do I think? What I'd like to hear is something around, what are you going to do? Is there a role in this? And honestly, I'm tired of the Christian church not doing anything, not saying anything. And I really feel we're going to be judged on that because, the scripture is fairly clear. In fact, in Psalm 82, the scripture says the Lord is going to have a tribunal and he is going to review what we are doing. And are we executing against his mandate, his global mandate, to love with mercy, to free the oppressed, to loosen the bounds that are on people, and to make things better because they are, and we are all made in his image. We're going to be accountable for this stuff. So I'm tired of having to deal with this. I wish other people would really get going, and I really think it's on the church to get moving.
Well, a couple of thoughts. I mean, first of all, thank you for saying that. And as the white guy in this conversation, that's important for me to hear from you. And thank you for being in conversation with me and people like me. That's it. One thing. Another thing that strikes me is that even as you were talking before, you mentioned Psalm 82, and you're talking about the different dimensions of our faith. And I'm thinking, oh, this is the Psalms, right? Because you've got Psalms that are lamenting, man. They are pouring it out. God, where are you? And then sometimes the same Psalm shifts into, but you're the God that saves me. You're the God of my salvation. And there's this, and then there are Psalms that are deeply expressive of God's justice and God's call to justice. and then there are Psalms that really focus on our worship as a community, our individual. So as you were talking, I'm thinking, if all we had was the Psalms, we would have enough to know that God is calling. I mean, God's throne is founded on justice and righteousness. We would know that that is something that is deeply important to God. We would know about confession. We would know about just these. We would know about hope. And what you said, I think, was hugely important. Ultimately, our hope is in the Lord, right? Not in what we can do, but as you imply, those of us who are God's people need to be deeply involved in God's work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. James says, show me your faith, I'll show you my works.
Right.
Faith
Yeah.
without works is dead.
Right.
So it's
First
not
John.
Intellectual assent.
Right. First John. How can you see a brother or sister in need and not offer help and say you have the Lord's love? And so, right. Yeah, I really appreciate your the challenge in what you said to all of us on this call, regardless of our ethnic identity or who we are, where we are. What is it that God is calling us to do in our particular place for the sake of His kingdom and His justice? And that's part of. And so one of the things that we got into this because I just have been. It struck me that you are both living this out in your quote unquote private life in your family and with your friendships, but you are also living out your faith in this season of life publicly to make a difference. Mm-hmm. So somebody asked, and this is kind of, I love this question. What are you most proud of? This being in your third of life. What are you most proud of? What is your most exciting outlook for your future? And what drives your passion? So proud of, outlook for the future, what drives your passion?
Wow. I think with all humility, I think the thing I'm most proud of is I'm proud that I am, that I've got a wonderful family and a great wife. And I'm thankful. I don't want to even use that word. And I'm thankful that I have opportunities to be useful for the King's service. But it starts here at home first, and then it moves from there. We don't have it's not perfect, but I'm thankful, and I have a wonderful wife and some great kids. There's work to be done, trust me. But I start there, and then I'm thankful that I can be useful for the King's service.
Yeah, that's great. And you've sort of alluded to this, but the question that was put up, what drives your passion? I mean, obviously you care deeply about things. So where is that coming from in you?
I think I don't think you can ever escape where you've come from with your intersection with God and your, and the experiences and communities you've been a part of. I'm the son of a New York City cop. We weren't wealthy people. My mom was one of 9. My dad was one of 8. They were part of the Great Migration. No one had really gone to college. So I've come from an experience base that is very different. And then somehow, by God's grace, we got moved through this world and into some very unique places. But I can't escape those experiences in that life. The next part is, you intersect with God, and He's infusing your life through His word, through His spirit, through the love of others, and that shapes you, and then, as you just continue to mature, you've seen enough. And after a point on something, you're like, I've seen enough. All right, we got to do something. We got to try something. I don't know if any of these things are always going to work, but we're at least going to be out there trying to stay on mission with the King's mission. And we're going to try some stuff.
So, I'm just struck by the fact that it's a matter of paying close attention to whatever God has given you for his work, and not being afraid to step into it. Again, I mentioned this woman in Arizona I know who's doing a relatively modest work for in terms of immigration, but it would have been so easy. See, what I would have tended to do is think, oh my gosh, this immigration thing is so big, I can't make a difference, so I'm not going to. And what you were talking about, what she's done is just, this is where I have an opportunity, and it may be small, it may be large. I mean, you started in with the Salvation Army, now you're in a national place of influence, but that isn't the main point. The main point is sort of your faithfulness in the place where God has put you, and sort of walking into that and discovering what God has. I've got a couple more questions that are kind of fun. When you were transitioning out of full-time work to what you're doing now, were there some, I mean, mostly it's been a really good thing, but were certain things challenging to you? Was it certain things hard in making that transition from, being an executive vice president of General Mills to being a wise fellow? By the way, that's the name of his counseling. I mean,
Yeah, of course. I mean, let's be real. You're going 100 miles an hour, flying all over the place, doing this, doing that. You're in China, Beijing, and you're meeting with these folks, and you're in India, then you're here, then you're there, then you're in a big meeting. Yeah, of course, there's some quiet time, once you make that transition that, kind of makes you, twitch a little bit because you're so used to being, fully active. But we are human beings, not human doings. Mm-hmm. And so, that's the other part of life. And maybe it was good for people like myself to, move from the freneticness of the activity to maybe, finding a bit more of the value of people, of life, of the gifts that are available for each person. And maybe when you're going really fast, you just miss a whole lot of stuff.
So
you have to transition.
So you perfectly set up the next question we got from someone, which is, do you have any quiet time? What does that look like? A devotional time? How do you recharge? And you've already mentioned some things in terms of people and all, but how do you, with all that you've been doing, how do you connect with the Lord? How do you recharge and refresh?
Yeah, first thing, I'm a first thing in the morning kind of guy. I'm not an early riser, so don't worry about that. You don't have to. I get up in the morning and I read the Lord's Word, and I have been reading the good book cover to cover in some form or fashion, whether it's a 1-year Bible, 1 day, 10-day, whatever, for almost 30 years. And I read different versions. I have a Moody Bible Institute, book. I've got Val Ruden Zook's commentary. I've got Matthew Henry's commentary. And I read, and if there's something that strikes me, I go pull a commentary and I read a little deeper about that. And I do that 365. When we obviously pray, we have time for prayer, and pray with my wife and kids on Sundays. It's a new blessing that came with this pandemic. We now have time to pray as a family and do some different things. I love the outdoors, so that's a little tricky in the winter here, but we'll get out and we'll ski, and I started snowshoeing, never done that. Find new things to do. But I am by nature a moved person. I'm an active person. I'm not as, there are many more contemplative people out there in the world than myself, but I'm on the move. But I start the day, trying to anchor, with the Lord and let His Word speak to me.
Well, it's a great answer. Hey, we're by the way, snowshoeing. I haven't done it much, but thumbs up on snowshoeing. It's a great way to get exercise when it's snowy.
Yeah, I mean, in a pandemic, I mean, you got to come up with new stuff.
That's right.
It's been tough being here. When you can't get out and catch people for lunch and go places. So you start finding new things.
I'm sure of that. So, Marc, we're getting near the end of our time. This has been just a rich and a wonderful conversation. I'm assuming that a bunch of the folk who are on this in this webinar right now, and many others will watch it in a recorded version. We call this purposeful retirement. You have any final words as you just think of the people who are there, kind of where you are or where you were when you were getting ready to retire? Any words of wisdom you'd like to leave people with?
I guess I would just say, number one, if you're really thinking about it, plant some seeds. Think about a plan in advance. Plant some seeds. Number two, just because we're changing careers, we're not changing our life with the Lord. So, stay connected. You might actually have things He'd like you to do, and He might guide you to those things if you're open. The other thing is, think of it as a wonderful adventure. What a gift, for yourself and perhaps even for your community. This can be fun. This is not a, oh gosh, I'm dying, or something like that. It's actually opening up a new way of living, and there should be some joy in that.
Well, that's a great closing word, and I think a great encouragement to people. And again, one of the things I sense, you're an exceptional person, an exceptional leader, but also I think your story encourages any of us to look at what we have and what God's given us. That's why I love you say plant some seeds. So you didn't say, bring in the tree and plant it. It's no, plant some seeds, see what God does with it. And even as you described your story, things would open up, new things and new opportunities, and that's I guess you could say that's the seeds growing some. So, well, Marc, this has been really, to me anyway, a great encouragement. And again, one of the things I'm going to do as soon as we get done, I'm putting you and your colleagues in Minnesota on my prayer list every day in terms of especially the stuff you're dealing with the racial justice or injustice issues. And I appreciate the fact that you speak plainly about that. I also really appreciate the fact that you and your folks are trying to figure out what can we actually do, because I think many of us would like things to be done, but we don't have that kind of wisdom or experience. But I'm going to look for it. We will put in the chat the work that you and your folks have done in terms of, hey, here are some things that could be done, because I expect some of those are going to be relevant outside of your area too. And we say, how can we and for the church, how can we be faithful in this season as we proclaim the grace, mercy, justice, love of God? As you said, you listed out all those things earlier, and that we're called to do that. And I appreciate both your example and your encouragement. So thank you for being with us, Marc.
Hey, bless you, brother. It's always a pleasure, man.
All right. And to all of you, thanks for being with us. We will send out sort of a thank you email, and we'll have some links in there. Would love to have you connect with the Pree Center. From our website, you can sign up for our newsletter that'll keep you posted on webinars we will continue to have and other kinds of opportunities for you. Our vision and our passion is to help you flourish in the season of life, to do well internally and in your relationships, and also to make a difference for the kingdom in the world. So blessings to you all, blessings to you, Marc, and thanks everyone for this time.
Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye.